WeatherBrains. Woot woot.
Shoot your brains.
Woot,
Hello,
woot.
hello, hello, good evening, good evening, good evening. WeatherBrains episode number 521, the weekly show about weather, the pre-show for January 12th, 2016. This is the part of the show where we say outrageous things and occasionally share boring personal stories and humorous anecdotes. And I would imagine that...
Like, I can't believe we've done this for 521 weeks.
Yeah, somebody might say, get a job, will you?
Yeah.
Or some people might think we're out of boring stories, but we're not.
Oh, no. We always have boring stories.
So you can tell who the big shots are this week. They're at the AMS New Orleans. That would be Rick Smith. Kevin is out. I guess, is Kevin down there?
I doubt it.
I don't think so.
John, I'm going to report you.
You know,
Report me?
it's hard to get to those things for me. January is a tough time. The weather can be kind of funky and weird, and it's you're coming off some Christmas time off, and it's just hard. Where it's a little easier to slip away in October for the NWA meeting. It just seems like it just.
Are we
Yes.
going to start making plans for the
At
NWA meeting?
September.
Yes, at NWA Norfolk, I will be there. I will be there.
In
We
September.
need to have WeatherBrains from there.
in September.
Yes, I was at mid-September. It's like 15, 13, 10, something like that.
It's
Yeah.
on my calendar. I don't know.
Something,
Let me
yeah,
take a
something
look.
September.
It's
Yes.
September something or other, yes.
Let's
But
get a
apparently
couple-
the attendance at AMS is marvelous. I've seen some photographs from the general sessions, and it looks packed. I was at the last one they had in New Orleans. I want to say it was 3 years ago. And that's a very interesting place. And what's cool, they've got Comic-Con going on in the same place.
Really?
Yeah, with all these Star Wars creatures, and it's just an interesting mix of people. But looks like they got a great crowd. Maybe we can find somebody to give us an impromptu report.
Right.
I was hoping Rick would join us from down there, but he's apparently at the WCM cocktail party or something. So
Yeah,
That
they're
would be
probably doing that.
That could be really entertaining, actually.
Yeah.
Bill Murray's typing in, "Can you guys hear me?" And the answer is no.
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 Yeah. Hey, John,
Word.
speaking from experience, you get a bunch of WCMs drunk and you can really get some tall tales.
Show
Well, that's
title. Yes.
Oh, I'd like to see that. I mean,
A bunch
hear
of
that.
WCMs drunk. I think that'd be a
Yes.
great title for this show.
Hear that as in stories. I'm sure they're
Right. So
interested.
how do you really feel about your MICs?
So I guess Bill just hung up on us. We got to get Bill a new mic interface or something. He's having problems every week now.
By the way, the meeting in Norfolk is 10 to 15 September.
All right.
So why do they move it up? Do we know? I mean, any
Yeah,
reason for
because
that?
we went through a couple of years where the federal government decided to cancel travel,
I don't-
and it
Oh.
cooked us. I can tell you personally how much it cost the NWA.
Although, they moved it up, but they may not avoid it, because if they cut travel at the end of the year, you're still September, you could have your travel cut at the last minute. So, I mean, I don't think there's a safe time.
Now,
John.
Brian, we went back and forth on this for literally a couple of years to try to figure out when it worked best for everybody.
Yeah.
It just does not.
No, and that's why I say I don't think you could pick, a perfect time where you would avoid it completely. Unfortunately.
Yeah. So did you get a chance to look at my Facebook page today? Talking
No, I
about personal stories which might be illuminating. We had a lightning strike here early Sunday morning, about 5 minutes after 1 a.m. that hit a tree about a half mile from my house.
Oh.
And so I put some pictures on Facebook of that tree, which was split in half. It was about a 2-foot diameter tree, about 15 feet around, split it right down to the ground.
Wow.
Wow.
And that was as loud a strike as I've ever heard.
Yeah, I remember finding a pine tree that had been struck down south of the National Weather Service office. Not anywhere near the Weather Service office, but I was on my way back and saw this tree. It was a pine tree, and the lightning basically vaporized the sap
Yeah.
and pieces of the tree were thrown. Are you ready for this? Literally measured 350 feet.
Wow.
I mean, that tree, when that exploded, I mean, that must have been, like a huge bomb going off. There were pieces across the street. The across the street person was actually related to the man and woman who lived in the house next to the tree. Fried almost all their electronics.
Oh, yeah.
Hmm.
Let me show you
All
a
right,
picture.
let's,
I'll share this with you. I don't know if you can see this now.
Oh!
So there's the tree.
Whoa!
Yeah, and it apparently took out a number of windows
Wow.
on the property across the street there. It was really loud.
And that's close to your house?
Half a mile.
Whoa!
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah. And what was the temperature at my house at the time of this?
26.
46.
46.
I was going
Well,
to say
okay.
52.
After a record high of 60 that day.
Woo.
Wow.
Hey, let me bring in Bill real quick and get Joe on here. So, Bill, can you say something?
Yeah, testing 1, 2, 3.
Oh, there you are.
Got you now.
Is your Christmas tree still up? Wow!
It'll be up till Valentine's Day probably.
What?
Wow!
At least
That's-
we might just leave it up till next year. It's
I'm
whole
gonna
easy.
say, if you just leave it up the whole year long. This is Alabama. I mean, come
Keep
on.
it
date
watered.
Christmas.
Keep it watered. It's a natural humidifier.
I think it's kind of pretty over there in the corner like that.
Yeah.
Kind of gives a festive atmosphere. All right, there's Joe Bastardi,
Can you hear me?
Oh
Yes.
Yes.
the man, the myth, the legend.
Yeah.
He looks
This
like a
might be-
pilot.
I almost tweeted that tonight with my
I don't
post.
have those. I don't have those plug phones. I just have regular phones. I figure since everybody in Bama's celebrating being #1 in the country in football, I got my Penn State wrestling hat on because we're.
All right. Well, let's see. What do we need? We're ready. I mean, Kevin's here. Well, I thought Kevin was
I
out.
thought he wasn't going to be here. I took him off the list.
I invite everybody.
Because I have to teach 456 graders on Friday.
Wow, you still got that tree up back there, Bill. That's nice.
I know. they've already been busting my chops about that. Joe.
You guys wouldn't believe what happened to me. My tree blew out of the out of our yard the other day. So after church, we're driving back. I said, I saw this tree, and I said, that's our tree. I drag it all the way to the house, find out it wasn't my tree. It was actually the tree belonged to the yard. My tree was someplace else. Now that tree got blown out today. I sent a video of the snow squall here, the thunder snow squall. I don't know if you guys got it. And I was out there. We had 50-mile-an-hour winds and 2 inches of snow, thunder and lightning and everything else. The video my son made it's called "Idiot in the Snow 2." I had "Idiot in the Snow 1" last winter. So.
All right. Well, let's see. I think we're good to go here.
Something's got to be wrong. It's a minute before 8:30.
Yeah, this is like shocking. We're not supposed to be on time.
You're welcome. It's every time I'm here, you're on time.
We are. It's something about your presence. You just kind of get us.
Give you a nice calm.
Yeah, and again, Joe, just so you'll know, we are going to simulcast this on the TV side on a cable channel we have here. So, not that it makes any difference, but we like to disclose all of that. And other than that, I think we're good. So Bill is bailing. He has to do a weather program to 6th graders
On Friday. That's
So I'm doing 2 programs tomorrow.
I got a sweeps piece and work I'm doing tomorrow, and
Oh, brother.
Don't be giving me a hard time. I got to teach 9 or 5 sections on Friday. So
Look, Bill still thinks it's Christmas time. Give him a break.
Oh, hey, Kevin, your mic's the wrong one.
but at least you're here.
Yeah, sounds like Kevin's mic's under his armpit.
Yeah.
Any better?
Much better.
Yes.
yes. You don't look any better, but you sound better.
Oh, man.
Boy.
Good to know who your friends are.
That's a
All
show
right.
title.
Pipes
right.
anyway, but some head cold has got a hold of my pipes, so.
Uh-oh.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I'm just coming off of that,
First
Kevin.
real excuse for not being on the show tonight. All right, so let me roll these 2 tracks, and we are recording.
Yeah,
And
don't forget all the
here
record
we,
buttons.
Yeah. Here we go in 5, 4, 3. Oh, I got a jingle for Joe.
The science is in. Science.
All right, here we go in 5. Here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
WeatherBrains.
Time to talk a little weather. This is WeatherBrains, episode number 400. No.
Whoa! Whoa!
One.
We're 100 off.
But the dock is 100 here. This is number 521 for the 12th of January, 2016. This might be a show for the ages. I sense in my bones this is going to be a good one. And first off, got a few folks out. And by the way, this is the week of the annual meeting of the American Meteorological Society. And we've got Rick Smith, who was a representative in New Orleans. We were hoping he would join us live for an update, but apparently Rick, Brian, is at the WCM cocktail party in the French Quarter. Did you ever go to one of those?
No, I never went to one of those, but he's probably there representing WeatherBrains well, I'm sure.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, and Rick is, out of everybody on this show, he's the one you could trust, I think, in the French Quarter, so maybe he'll keep some order there. But Rick is in New Orleans. We'll get a full report from him next week on what went on down there.
But you never know what's going to happen when you get a bunch of WCMs drunk.
Yeah. And that is the show title, yes. It's our show title for this week.
Not leading anything, but...
And for those that don't know, Brian Peters worked as a WCM at the National Weather Service in Birmingham for many, 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 many years. So, Brian,
and I speak from experience on that one.
From experience, yes. Wow.
Yes.
So you didn't hit the liquor cabinet on the way to these storm surveys, did you, or anything?
No, never.
No? Okay.
Sometimes I had to hit those liquor cabinets on the way home from the storm surveys.
We've got Kevin Selly is just not doing well. Man, I am so sorry. I mean, I
hate it.
I have pity for you after hearing your voice. I'm so sorry.
Well, that's all right. I have chosen to survive, and I will. I went to the doctor this morning, but I might just listen more than talk today. I want to hear more from Brian, though. Are the WCMs banned from anywhere for their behavior?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. Not yet, anyway.
Not yet. We'll have to wait till the end of the week to see what happens for New Orleans.
Kevin, of course, is in Wichita Falls, Texas. So you're actually going on television with this tonight, huh? Wow.
Yes, I actually had an interesting experience. You know, those of us who have been on TV can relate. You know, you go out and about around town and whatnot, and you know, people will recognize you, of course, and they'll come up and say something or whatever. And then sometimes, less frequently, you're recognized by your voice. You know, somebody will hear and they go, "Are you so-and-so?" "Oh, I thought I recognized that voice." And I got recognized at Walgreens today because of my cough.
That's kind of creepy.
That's a new one.
This old couple was on. I was waiting for my medicine, and this old couple was on the other side. And you know, you kind of get that sense, right? People are looking; they're trying to figure out. And you kind of get. And this went on for, you know, I kind of see out of the corner of my eye, and they're checking and they're looking, and it just went on for several minutes. And finally, I coughed a couple times, and the guy came over and says, "Oh, you're the weatherman."
Yeah. At least they know who you are one way or the other. It's good for market research. Yeah. Dr. John Scala. Dr. John, you didn't go down to AMS this week in New Orleans?
I was really tempted, James, but being self-employed, I have to look at the bottom line. And decided I can't do too many meetings in 1 year. And since NWA will be in September, and we just had an NWA in October, maybe next year I can make it to AMS.
I hear you. And you're up there with our special guest. We'll bring him in just a second. We got Aubrey Urbanowitz, and it looks like it snowed really for John. First off, John, did it snow at your place today?
Yeah, first snow, James. I measured 0.2 of an inch, and as Joe was saying, we had a snow squall come through here, and it went through the state capitol at 5:28 p.m. Now, how good do you think that was?
That's good.
5:28 p.m. and then it came through here in Lancaster at about 6:14. Really bad timing. Our first snow of the season.
I heard I-74 was closed. Parts of it.
I-70's in Pennsylvania. 74 is the one over in Ohio and Kentucky.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a mess. Aubrey Urbanowitz, it snowed at your place today, didn't it?
I saw about 17 flakes. at my house, and I counted every single one of them. But we had snow squalls, and I was looking at everything yesterday, and that was my fear, was some of these bands would come through kind of right at 5 o'clock, and it would cause some icy conditions with some of the rapid cooling. We do have some areas within maybe 20, 30 minutes of me within my DMA that have a dusting to an inch and stuff like that. But in Harrisonburg and just outside of Harrisonburg, I think we've seen a few flakes, and that is about it. Probably about 7 miles to the west, we have a good heavy dusting. But yeah, just windy. You can hear the winds howling.
Oh, yeah.
Cool.
Oh, yeah.
Cool. Great. All right, well, let's bring in Joe Bastardi. Joe's been on all these network shows. He's on the national cable channels. But Joe, when you get on WeatherBrains, this is the pinnacle of the media appearances right here. You've hit the big time, buddy.
It took you so long, Joe.
Well, I wanted to be on, but it's a good thing I'm on because I can recommend Kevin. You get some glutamine in you. It's an amino acid that'll stop that cold.
Okay,
about 25 grade. It'll be added. I'm serious. It's a great immune system booster. In fact, if you were competing against me, I'd recommend that you not take it. That's what I tell people. Very good supplement. So I think that's good. We got nailed up in here. We got in State College, you usually don't get snow squalls more than ½ inch. We got about 2 inches here at the house. And what happened was last year we had a similar Arctic front go through, and I got out there in Garrett. I get in my Penn State wrestling warm-up. We got James from Alabama, and I love the Crimson Tide. They won the national title. Well, we're ranked #1 in wrestling right now, Penn State, so I've got my hat on over here. But I wrestled over here, so I have this wrestling warm-up. It's old school. It's a wool coat. My wife hates when I put it on out in public. It's got the map of Pennsylvania on the back. So I made a video in it last year. I made one today. It's on Facebook. It's called Idiot in the Snow 2. And what's amazing is this is the second time my son Garrett's out there taking a shot, and it thunders and lightning while he's out there filming it. We actually had thunder and lightning here in State College today when this came through. So maybe it's a sign it's going to start snowing now. So interesting situation. It was a pretty dramatic squall. So
I thought I saw some lightning strikes on the map, and I kind of looked. I kind of scratched my head, going, "Is that right?"
Yeah, well, this is a heck of a. It was a heck of a short that's coming through, and there's a lot of energy involved and a lot of cooling going on. So it was pretty dramatic to see that type of thing happen. It iced everything up, so right at the wrong time. Yeah. When I was in school, we used to always time snow squalls about 4 or 5 o'clock. 6-period snow squalls, we used to call them at Penn State, and it was about that time. That time today, just everything's messed up for the evening rush hour here, which we actually do have, despite the fact that people think Happy Valley's a cow town.
We'll show you some cow towns down in South Alabama. So let me. We ask nosy personal questions here, Joe. So and typically we have Bill doing these formal interviews. So he's not on the show tonight. So you got the Zoo Crew guys in here. So people associate you for years and years and years and years with AccuWeather.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, you're gone, and you are now with Weatherbill Analytics. So what's the story with the departure and the new business there?
Well, the thing is that God made me to do the weather first, and you get in a situation sometime, and no fault. AccuWeather, it's a great organization. Obviously, Dr. Joel Myers has built something from nothing to the biggest private weather service on the planet. Just a remarkable story. And so there's no animosity there or anything like that. It's just that I felt that sometimes I felt like I was a creation of a machine, and I'm really not like that. With me, it's always been weather first. A lot of people think I say things to get attention and everything else. Well, if I say something, I believe it because of the work I've done. So I found that some of the things that I was all about, there comes a time and place where things have to change with that, and that's basically what happened. And to think, it's kind of strange because every once in a while I see Dr. Myers around town, and what has been done there, the field of meteorology will never understand the magnitude of what has been done at AccuWeather. That guy was being laughed at because he said that he could sell a forecast that you could get for free, all right, when he started it. Now that it's 50 years later, everybody's going like, well, what was a big deal, right? Now that you look back at it. But it's an amazing rise, and he had people around him and Joe Sobel's still there, Elliot Abrams still there. These guys, when I first walked in there, I thought I was in the New York Yankees of weather. I really did. It was unbelievable. And the fights that would occur over 2 degrees on day 5 in New York because everybody wanted to win. It was I just come off. I'm the only meteorologist since 1950 ever to wrestle Division I, and wrestling is a very competitive sport. And I found that the level of competitiveness in that office was basically, it was like going from one wrestling team to another wrestling team, except we were all brothers in the war of the weather, and it was just really something being around there. But that being said, moving on, I got to a stage in my life where I said, listen, what are you really all about? You got to go out there and try to prove it. So that's what I did.
Joe, AccuWeather's been pretty good over the years at protecting their turf. Did you have much trouble with them?
We're not going to talk about anything that happened after. We're just going to concentrate on all the positives that came out of that, and I'd like to think that I'm a better person for being around the people that I was around all those years. And still, I do miss Banner. The guy closest to me, to ever being a brother to me, besides my brother Matty, was Ken Reeves. I mean, and you got Joe Sobel and Elliot and Joel, and these guys. Joel was my professor in college. I mean, I think Joel liked me from the first day because I fought with him every day in class. None of his classes were boring when I was in there, and none of the. And he taught me. It's kind of strange because my dad is bigger than life to me. My dad has a degree in meteorology out of Texas A&M. And it was really weird because when I went to work over there at AccuWeather, things would come out of Joel's mouth that came out of my dad's mouth. I remember one time he told me, I was arguing with him about something. I slammed a bust in his face. I said, well, you missed on this forecast. And he turns around and he looks at me and goes, you know what? You're going to know you're pretty good the day people judge you on your worst forecast, right? And it just sort of floored me right then and there. And I remember him saying those kind of things to me because a lot of times the people in anything, in sports or whatever, the weakest people in sports tend to brag about the days that they did their best. Well, a lot of the guys that are on top remember most the times that they failed and stuff. And I found that over the years that was a very driving thing as far as I went. I have to confess, I believe the guys that I have around me, we are a small, tight-knit bunch that just work. But I do miss the camaraderie that I had in those days back in the 1980s and 1990s. I think that when I started coming to the forefront a little bit, some things started to change. I got real driven, and I've always been driven. I've always been very driven to, I felt I was given an ability and talent, and my job is to, in front of the good Lord above, do the best I could with it. But I think there were a lot of times I put me first rather than some of the other things that should be put first. And so I got so driven in the office, I couldn't talk to anybody sometimes because I was always afraid I was going to say something wrong. Because, like you say something like, oh, how come that cloud photograph is on? I remember one time specifically when that El Nino crash in January 2010 occurred. I don't know if the SOI crash. The Southern Oscillation Index went to a double -80. And I knew when I saw that 2 days in a row that this is going to go crazy, right? Because when I have this theory about what happens when the Southern Oscillation Index suddenly crashes against what I call the 30-day running base state. And I was flipping out in the office, and people were looking at me like I was from outer space. And I started thinking to myself, you know something? And it's nothing against other folks, but I sort of live in a different world now. And sometimes whether it's selfishness or whatever, you may be making people in another world uncomfortable to some extent. But boy, I always tell folks all the time that is never going to happen again, to build something from nothing like that in our business, because now we've got 1,700 private weather services, and almost all of them are trying to catch AccuWeather. So you think about what a great thing that is there, and it was an honor to work for them for 33 years.
Well, I've got about 87 questions for you, Joe, but before we get into a lot of that, real quickly, tell us about WeatherBell analytics? Who is behind it?
Well,
What is it, and what's the objective?
Well, but my objective is to build the greatest long-range forecast center in the world. I mean, I always was looking at that, where people would come to us when they wanted to see the why before the what, I call it. Okay, a lot of folks come in at the end or wait till it's safe, and so what happened was, I was going nuts. I mean, I got out of there and I was sitting there. Well, I always had a job. Even when I was at Penn State, even when I was wrestling, I always had a job on the side since I was 14 years old, and here I am, unemployed. I couldn't believe it. I mean, the day after I graduated from college, I was working the next morning. I graduated March 4th, 1978. I'm working March 5th at 8 a.m. As a technician at AccuWeather. You had to do that first before you became a forecaster. So I didn't know what the heck I was doing, what was going to happen, and then some people contacted me, and fortunately, one of the guys had been watching me all these years, and he had some great ideas. He was a Cornell engineer, and thought about some things, and WeatherBell started, and I got a hold of Joe DeLeo, who I never worked with, but always looked up to, and still feel he's the best long-range forecaster the planet's ever seen. I mean, there's Namias, there's Joe DeLeo, there's the guys. I mean, he is. If folks knew how good he was, it's startling. He has this gold book of teleconnections, and I'd reveal it to you, but then you'd be sworn to secrecy the rest of your life.
You have to break our legs, right?
Yeah, but what happened was we started small, and we're trying to build things ground up, energy, retail, hedge funds, just across the board, where the weather has its fingers in everything nowadays. Even backing up TV Mets, maybe. For instance, in what you guys do, a lot of times, there's a 5-day forecast, 7-day forecast, but then you're starting to see people branch out into longer range forecasts, and what the summer's going to be like and things like that. Anything to give you a competitive edge. I'm not the quarterback. What I do is I block for people all the time. Now, people see me on TV or whatever, and they think, oh, well, he's on TV. That's not what I'm about. I mean, if someone asks me to be on, I'll be on, because I got a big mouth and I like to fool around. But the fact is that I'm more of a fullback blocking for someone else to carry the ball. Okay, a lot of energy companies have great meteorologists working for them. We work for them, and maybe there's 3 days out of the year that I have an idea that might help them, and then they dig in and they take it. So that's what. It has to do with that, and right across the board, anywhere where weather can help in the longer term, and we continue, and we're also trying to branch out. We're a global organization too. I got the biggest private de-icing company in the world. They're based in England, for instance. But we're also really trying to get into data acquisition, things like that. We've got the best guy on the planet, Dr. Ryan Maui. I mean, he's like the professor on Gilligan's Island. If you've ever watched Gilligan's Island, that professor knew everything about everything. Hey, you got bit by a spider. Oh, that's the Kakadora smukalakis, and you're going to be breaking out in 2 minutes. I mean,
and the professor had that big pipes voice too, the big radio voice.
Ryan does. I mean, Ryan. And so you got DeLeo, you got Tommy Downs, who came from Storm 2K. He's younger than us, and he just keeps bringing in new ideas. We have a method we call independent consensus. What we do is this. We don't sit there and argue it out first and come up with an idea. What we do is say, okay, let me see your best years. Like, let's say we're putting together a summer forecast. I'll say to the guys, give me your 5 best years. I have my 5 best years. Joe may have his 5 best years. And we see where they intersect. And generally, if you have 3 people that are committed and their standards are real high, looking at a target, they may come from different angles, but they will all be seeing that same target 2, 3, 4 times, and then bang, you go from there. And then there's what we have now, this WeatherBell Pioneer model with Joe DeLeo, where he's got 21 different variables. And see, I think the big key behind analoging is figuring out how to weight the analogs. And it's like what is this El Nino worth versus other areas of the globe where the weather's doing different things, and you match those things up. And sometimes the problem is you can't evenly distribute the weight. You may have to do something 3 times, 4 times, 5 times versus 1. that type of thing, and see which one is taking over at the time. Like right now in this El Nino, hey, this is 1966 all over again. I mean, the greatest turnaround ever from a warm December to a cold January was 65, 66. So when you start looking at that, you start saying, okay, do we see the similarities? 57, 58, December 57, very warm. December of 87, very warm, but cold Januaries and cold Februaries to follow. So you might say, okay, I've got to weight that a little bit more than, let's say, 97, 98 or some other analog piece. So all these things are going on. You know, James, and you folks, what's interesting is this. There seems to be, you know, there's always this little friction between the club fighters and the professional boxers, okay? Guys in the synoptic side, and it's been like this since I was in school. You know, the guys in the dynamics, they always sort of looked at us as ditch diggers. And my idea is, okay, fine, the world needs a good ditch digger. And if I could dig the ditch better than everyone else, I'll have a job doing that. But there is a lot of research done in what we do. Hours and hours and hours of research done. And then we test it in real time. Like some of the ideas on this winter, people were saying, what the heck are you guys talking? Where are you coming up with this stuff, right? And yet what we're doing is we're looking at all the stuff that we've accumulated through the years, Joe and myself and Tom, and we put that together and say, let's see if we can match this up. And I'll be darned, you know, we've got to get the snow to pan out in the south and up the eastern seaboard. But you look at how quick this winter flipped, right? My problem was early in the year, I thought it would try to do it around the time of the solstice, right? Because that was an the old mid-range forecasting center, Paul Stokels and Ships and those guys back in the 80s, and Dave Weinbrenner. These guys were way ahead of their time. They always looked for pattern flips around the time of the solstice. So I naturally would gravitate toward that. But it came 10 to 15 days late, and now you see where we are in January. But the 500 millibar went right to the pattern that you know, the Pioneer model that we've been trying to perfect had. But do you realize how many hours of research went into that? And it's like when I hear this stuff, you know, I told Dr. Shepard, I go, well, you know, you guys have peer-reviewed research. I understand that. But our peer-reviewed research is everybody criticizing what we're saying, and clients that say, you know, you were wrong, or you have to be right in the private sector, you know. So it's sort of a different aspect, but the bottom line is you're trying to arrive at the right answer. What is the truth? That's what you always have to pursue. And I try to pursue in everything I do in life, and certainly in weather. And something like tomorrow, the truth is always in question until tomorrow comes. And of course, nowadays you hear people actually arguing over what happened yesterday. So things change around from what they were.
And I'm getting all these tweets, and let me just go ahead and I'm going to buzz myself. But and again, I don't even, you know, the State of the Union's on television now, and I don't even want to go down that path. But some have accused Weather Bill as being funded by big oil, and it's a political entity. How would you respond to that?
Who could possibly think that? Okay, that's staggering. I don't understand where that comes from at all. If you're saying I have a fossil fuel company that pays me to be right and then fires me when I'm wrong, well, that's fine. I mean that's true, but I don't sit there and talk to anybody about that. Right now we're pushing for developing products in wind and solar. Why? Because we believe that we're going to go that way. So, for instance, we warned our wind and solar clients this year that it was going to be a rough year in West Texas this year. We told them, look, start looking at 83. That's a year Borger set the Texas record for snowfall, 56 inches, right? And you can see what's going on with this. There's already been a couple of big storms in West Texas. You can see this, for instance, threat in North Texas coming up this weekend with the Arctic front and the wave on the Arctic front, whatever the thing goes down the Gulf of Mexico. But the fact of the matter is, and this shows you how this is just nothing but lies. Wind and solar power is a first derivative profit center for us. Why? Because an energy company, any energy company, may want to know if it's going to be too above or too below normal in Chicago. But a wind company, a solar company, needs to know what's going on the day one too. I mean, if you get those turbines in West Texas, like back in February 2011, I believe it was, where they cannot turn because of a major ice storm, that is a real problem. All right, there was a huge fiasco. I forget exactly where it was. What's it, ERCOT or whatever, where they could not generate the power out of that wind field there. Now, a good forecaster 4, 5, 6 days away would be able to warn that so that the company be ready. So this is a huge boon to us. That's what I don't understand, where people try to say that stuff. I don't care if you tell me eating Cheetos and snapping your fingers gives you energy. You still need a forecast for that, and that's all we're about. Now, are we allowed to have our private opinion? I would still hope so in the United States of America, that I'm allowed to say that I think that the AGW situation is being pushed beyond what I believe. Okay, so that's that. Now, if that means
let me ask you about that, because James kind of dipped his toe into this, or more than his toe, a couple of years ago.
I still haven't. Listen, before you go, Kevin. Yeah. Every day I wait at my mailbox right out there for my check from the Koch brothers to come. They never send me a check. I don't get this.
Well, James got a lot of backlash. I'd be interested to know what kind of backlash you've gotten, if you can tell us about any of it. What do you call it? There are people in this field that don't see like me, and I respect them. And I see, basically, you know, for instance, I was talking to Dr. Marshall Shepard over at Weather Geeks. I said, look, we all agree that different things drive the climate. I may be waiting something less than what I should. Maybe 25, 30 years from now, my son is going to disprove everything I've said. You know, my son Garrett, he's studying to be a meteorologist. Maybe he's going to think something different. But until such a time that everything I've seen is actually contradicted by what's going on now, why should I change? You see, the problem with people that don't understand is this, that I have always used climate as the foundation for my forecast. It's based on my dad's philosophy. You know, what happened yesterday is where you stand today to reach for tomorrow. That's in anything, okay? And your past can be quicksand or it could be bedrock. It depends on how you look at things, you know. But the reason I'm like this is when someone says something to me, this is the worst ever, and I could pull out 10 examples worse than that right off the top of my head, why am I naturally going to believe them? Listen, guys, I wrote an article in the Patriot Post about 4 things I'm looking at to disprove my theory or my ideas. I said back in 2007 on the O'Reilly factor that we were going into a slow temperature downturn as measured by the NCEP temperature data, which we can see every 6 hours, and it's doing beautifully on seeing how warm this El Nino spike is. What I don't understand is why people look at the El Nino spike and then the cooling episodes in the wake of the last 2 El Ninos, 06 and 10, somehow the other day don't count. So what I think is going to happen is after this El Nino spike, I said this a year ago, I've been waiting for this El Nino now because it's going to either prove me right or prove me wrong. There's going to be a temperature fall after it that's likely to be as great or greater than the spike in front of it. But in the meantime, we keep going years and years and years with the temperature essentially not changing. Now, the smart argument against me is Le Chatelier's principle, where the atmosphere is actually warming, but it's constantly trying to fight and reestablish a balance, and that balancing level is going to be higher than what it was before, that area, okay? That's a good argument against me. And basically I can say, well, we're just going to have to wait and see till 2020, 2030 whether I'm right or wrong about that, because it's got to turn down. My statement was that by 2030, it's measured by the NCEP real-time data, which we've been using, and it's the most, in my opinion, is every 6 hours, NCEP takes the temperature of the Earth. It estimates it by way of the computer model, initializes it. Now, either they are way the heck off, and somebody better tell NCEP that your computer model doesn't know what it's doing, or they've got a great tool to instantaneously measure the Earth's temperature. And so you can see what it's doing right in front of you. What's interesting is no one seems to want to look at that, or no one wants to seem to give its due diligence. Now, it's a very simple test. If someone says the temperature is going to continue to go up, and it doesn't go up, guess what? You're wrong. If I say it's going to turn around and go back down, and it goes back down, I'm right. If it's in between, it's in between. But in the meantime, you have a cottage industry, and I believe it's guys on my side of the issues. If people pay close attention, you know, I notice when I tweet out, warmest December ever, NCEP record, warmest November ever, NCEP record. These, right? I don't see any retweets on my site.
Or if someone tries to pull this little ice age stuff because of the sun, right? I simply ask them, well, if you're trying to tell me 30 years of low solar is going to cause a little ice age, where's the heat from the 200 years of high solar? I happen to think it's stored in the ocean. You get Kevin Trenberth thinks it's from CO2, right? I have a tough time understanding how the increase of one molecule of CO2 out of every 10,000 molecules of air over a 100-year period is suddenly run the climate. Very difficult for me to get my hands around, but then again, I'm a Neanderthal. But the fact of the matter is that we have to look at those things, and it has become a big side issue, a huge side issue, very deflective. It's like I said on the Hannity show the other night. I was on there. Said it's like a bull is charging you, and someone says, "Hey, look at that squirrel. Keep your eye on that squirrel." All we're doing is looking at side issues and not looking at the real issues that face us as a society today. That's what I believe is going on here. All right. So you got climate change, you got this, you got that. It's all over the place.
And Joe, let me ask, and again, I don't want to chase this rabbit too long because we want to talk about long-range forecasting. But one more question.
You just almost said lingerie forecasting. I don't get it.
Has your position on climate affected your relationship with Penn State University?
I don't know. I don't know. They were cordial to me when I go up there. My son's an undergrad up there. I don't know what they really think of me. All right. So there's not much I can say. I will say this, that I am closest to the wrestling program at Penn State. I wrestled there. I help out with the senior. No, they don't help out with the undergrads because the NCAA, but the Nittany Lion Wrestling Club is one of the premier USA wrestling clubs in the country. We have a couple gold medalists and everything else. I help out with strength training and nutrition advice and that type of thing. And my training partner is the assistant coach at Penn State. I lift with him almost every day, Casey Cunningham. So I'm much closer. Those guys remind me of my guys that I wrestled with back in the 70s. So Penn State is very different from when I went to school there. My daughter and I have sat out in front of Old Main on summer afternoons. I can't believe what I see. It's like I'm in culture shock because I'm always in the wrestling room with these guys that are just straight on goal oriented. We have a very smart wrestling team. We have a lot of guys with 4.0s on that team. We got a couple of guys that are engineers that are 4.0s, which is pretty darn impressive because I know as a meteorologist that was really, really tough. Keep my grade. I mean, my grades shot up when I started wrestling, but I mean, it's total commitment to wrestling and meteorology, or total commitment to wrestling and engineering and those things. So we have some real smart kids. So I sit there and I hang out. I say, well, things aren't so different. And then when I walk onto the main campus, I'm like, what? It's like I feel like, whoa. It's like Tommy Lee Jones in No Country for Old Men that goes, I'm seeing things that I can't even believe I'm looking at. So sometimes it is like that. But I'd like to think that every once in a while I go up to the weather tower, and I'd like to think that people understand that, hey, listen, I may agree with you on this, but the majesty of the atmosphere and the climate is much bigger than both of us together. So why don't we just look at that whole situation?
And I would like to see you and Dr. John wrestle at some point since y'all are so close up there. John, do you wrestle?
Not for your life. Are you kidding?
The sad
I'm a
thing.
runner and a cyclist.
I retired from wrestling and no one knew. That's the thing. But I still bodybuild. In fact, I'm probably going to compete the over 60 nationals in Pittsburgh in July this year. All right, I've actually done very, very well in that. No steroids. Other people probably say, well, he must be on steroids if he believes in doesn't believe in global warming. I want to point out something though, that Arnold, who is Mr. Olympia, does believe in global warming, but then again, Arnold did do steroids. I never did, so maybe that's the problem. I wasn't enlightened with them.
I have a local guy that actually was telling me about your wrestling stuff because he's got a son-in-law or his daughter or something like that went to some competitions with you. So yeah, he's a police officer, former police officer from Bridgeport, Connecticut. His name's Alan McNulty. I'm not sure what his daughter's name is, but yeah, apparently they competed, or his son-in-law competed with you at some point.
Huh. That's interesting. That's interesting. It's
All right, so Joe, here's a problem we have in our business. And again, I use you as an example of doing it right, and I'm not blowing sunshine up your skirt just because you're on the show. I've done it in public many times. So we are dealing, and every year it's an increasing problem with every Tom, Dick, Harry, and Jane in the country getting on social media or some blog saying there's going to be a winter storm in 2 or 3 weeks in the winter, and then in the summer they say there's going to be a hurricane every 2 or 3 weeks. And of course these things don't pan out, but yet we have to deal with the backlash. We're down here in the trenches having to tell people what the weather's going to do, and it seems like it's a growing problem. And many of these people aren't qualified. Maybe some of them kind of are, but most of them aren't. And it's gotten out of hand. Glenn Burns in Atlanta, he finally got so frustrated he snapped, and he kind of issued an ugly response to one of his viewers, and he shouldn't do that. But I can understand where he's coming from because it takes so much time. We get so frustrated. But as I see it, these people initially they become narcissistic. They develop a fan base. What they're doing, they're telling people what they want to hear. People that love snow, they're going to flock to these sites over and over, and they become intensely loyal. And these people that are writing this stuff, they become narcissistic with this big fan base they've developed, and then they become delusional where they're never wrong. And I never hear them say, I was wrong, I can be wrong. There is no humility. So the question is, what do we do about that? Or can there anything be done about this? Aubrey's had an example. I've had examples. They will attack you viciously if you dare to question a snowstorm forecast 3 weeks in advance. And they're drawing rain snow lines 2 or 3 weeks in advance.
They think it's a corporate. They think we're handcuffed by the TV stations, and that we are paying for these. Or no, we get access to these government sites, and we have to be loyal to these government sites, and that we are handcuffed to the TV stations. Is what some
guy said that I'm under Obama's law, where the federal government mandates what I say. I've been doing this 37 years. I've never had one person over me tell me what to say or how to say it. Not in 37 years. I mean, I've had people tell me about how to dress and how to, get the glare off your head and all these other things. But when it comes to content, I've not had a person say a word. And it's just gotten out of hand. And what you learn, you get clicks and you get likes when you talk about snow or winter storms or hurricanes or sexy weather. You put out a forecast where basically it's going to be sunny and 70. You don't get any clicks. You don't get any likes. Nobody's going to come back to your site. So they put this outrageous stuff out there, and then we have to deal with it. But, Joe, you seem to do it right. You seem to do it responsibly. Is there anything we can do to point people to credible sources?
Well, I can't speak to that because I've been wrong so much, and I remember being wrong. If you fight every day, you're going to get scarred. And I haven't taken a day off since I started with Weatherbell, 5 years. And the guys at AccuWeather will tell you the last 10 years I worked there, I worked every day. Now, for me, work is play in a lot of cases, so I don't want people to get the wrong impression. I enjoyed doing it, and I sort of was very proud of that kind of streak because, as the weather never stops. It's a relentless, infinite opponent, and it will beat you down and keep you there if you don't get back and fight against it. It's sort of like out of Rocky. That's how I look at some things. I will tell you this. If you ever seen the movie Chariots of Fire, there's a passage in there where Pastor Eric Little says, God made me fast and I feel his pleasure when I run. Well, God made me to look at the weather. God made me to be a weatherman, and I see his majesty in the atmosphere every day. Now, this has evolved over the past several years to this point where I try to do what I do in front of the good Lord above and not worry about the storms around me. There's a great, the passage in the Bible where Peter is walking on water. He's staring at Christ and walking on water. But as soon as he took his eye off
he started to sink like a rock.
Right. So I try not to look around anymore. I don't read stuff. Garrett comes downstairs and tells me this guy's saying that, this guy's saying that. I gotta tell you guys something. My son and I are very, very close, just like my dad and I are very close. My daughter and I are very close. Before Arthur, 5 days before Arthur, the good Lord dropped the maps of Arthur in my lap. This was July 4th, a couple of years ago. It was called Alex and it was early August 2004, which hit the North Carolina Outer Banks. That same kind of thing set up. So I remember people were saying, I was just trying to get attention. Every time I come out with a forecast, so I'm sort of, oh, he just says this or says that because he wants attention. Okay, well, I was potty trained, right? I don't need to get attention. That's how I look at it. But Garrett comes downstairs and he says to me, Dad, why don't you fight back? Because people were criticizing you. I mean, that's a hard thing for a father to hear, especially with the I'm Italian, that kind of thing. Right? So that's a hard thing for me to hear. I said, Garrett, you want to know something? You fight in the arena of the Lord, and you try not to pay attention to that stuff. And as soon as you try to do that, whether it's in weather or golf, he's a great golfer. So you golf in the arena of the Lord, you're going to be at a different level, okay? And you're going to sit there, and you're going to know when you got to say, hey, I'm wrong about something, or you're going to know how to turn, okay? And wrestling, we used to have to say, guys always seem to turn the right way if they've prepared themselves the right way. In other words, if you practice hard enough, you can feel something and you'll move the right way when the move comes up. You don't sit there and go, okay, I've got to do this. Same kind of thing in the weather. So what I try to do now is I try to, and even in the global warming situation, I'm trying not to get bent out of shape by the noise around me. What is my real mission? My real goal is to make this Weather Bell something where people say, my gosh, look at that, they're the best in the business. To do that, you've got to fight the weather, not other weather people. You have to care, but you have to be like a rock and care, and yet be able to stand there and take it. And so I've heard this complaint before. I personally think that I think it's great that people are so into the weather, right? They're into the weather like people are into sports now. I mean, and they have these followings and everything else. And you know what? That's great. If that's what everything's about with you, that's fine. Look, I like going some places. You know what I like? I like when I'm out with my mom and dad and someone says, hey, that's your son, like that. I like that stuff, okay? For me, I've always tried to hang around with people smarter than me or stronger than me. Not because I want to be them, but because I realize that I can see things in them that I could try to bring out in me. So this whole idea about worship and all this other stuff, man, there's only one object for me to worship, so I don't worry about that other stuff. And as far as these guys, I think, for instance, James, it must be very hard, very, very hard to be a global warming scientist today. Extremely hard. I wrote an article about it on Patriot Post. For instance, I know if I'm going to be wrong looking at things, okay? I know 3 or 4 things that will definitely prove me wrong. Have you ever tried to ask someone who is on that side of the issue, tell me what you need to see so that you'll know you're wrong? They can't come up with an answer. And you know what? I don't know what people's beliefs are, but to me, only God is right. So if you think you're right about everything, and you were bringing back this narcissism, if you think you're right about everything, what are you actually saying about yourself, right? So yeah. So maybe you have some of that. Maybe there are a lot of guys, maybe there are a lot of people that, you know what, they get a kick out of it or whatever. And then you've got to understand there are a lot of people who are absolutely sincere about this. They are. They're convinced that storm's coming. They're convinced that this is going on. And they want it. They actually want to do a good job. They want to show people they know what they're doing, right? And here's the other interesting problem, and I don't mean to step on anyone's toes. You know what?
Oh, go ahead. That's what we do on the show.
Well, you know something? We're blessed that we're in this. I mean, there are so many talented people. I watch some of the tweets that come out today, and I marvel at how smart people are about the weather. I'm really serious and stuff. And I sit here and I look at it this way and go, oh my gosh, that person probably should be working in this field, or that person has, I can feel the love of a person when some of these guys on Twitter and some of the people I encounter, and I say, how sad it is that they're not doing what we're doing. So I sort of look at it a different way. I say, okay, well, you know what, you want to do that, you go on and do that, and that's great. And there's always a threat, too, that they're right, that they hit the big storm. And you and I may not hit the big storm, right? Or something may happen.
If you forecast a winter storm every 2 weeks over and over and over, you're going to be right at some point.
Well, it's just like saying that anytime it's cold, yeah, we've got Arctic air coming in, we've got a chance of snow. I can say that every day that it's below 30-something degrees.
Guys, I've had people accuse me of being extreme. I'm sitting there going, well, you're the ones that are screaming that the weather's extreme. What do you call what happened with Snowmageddon? You know, I got ridiculed so bad in mid-January in 2010. I mean, I couldn't even hold, like I was telling you, I was flipping out in the office and people, what the heck are you looking at, right? And I'm sitting there, it's just like now I'm sitting here chomping at the bit because I've got the southern stream, I've got the ridging up in Canada. I'm sitting there going, okay, you know, we got to produce over here somehow or the other. But the pattern, the loft goes to things that I've seen before. It's going to stuff with this kind of blocking up in Canada to the north and the stream coming into California and trying to get out in the Carolinas. That's stuff I used to doodle in class when I was bored, which probably explains why my grades weren't as good as they should be. But the jet coming underneath and everything else, getting that ridge on the west shore of Hudson Bay, banana highs and all this other stuff going on. So you look at that, and if you've seen that map enough times, you say, hey, listen, it's probably going to hit. So believe me, because I'm a weather geek first, you know, it's funny. The weather is the lust for meteorology, but the real love is with the meteorology. And over the years, when you start loving the meteorology, then the weather sort of becomes, I'm not going to say secondary, but it becomes like, oh, well, that's nice. It actually happened. Look at the way it did. Look at the way it evolved. So a lot of the people have the big fascination with the maps and the big storms, and we all are. But think about it, guys. I mean, you know, they're probably even 3-4 days before Sandy. And that was a 9-day call. You know why? Because I had the maps. You know what the maps were? Hurricane Hazel, plus my dad telling me from when I was 7 or 8 years old, if you see that map and if you've got this going on in the Caribbean, that's the storm that's coming for Atlantic City, shortcut storms. My father used to always talk about shortcut storms. So here I am on October 21st. I'm looking at him going, oh my gosh, I've got the maps. Yet people were just ripping me. And you know what? After that storm came in, after Mayor Bloomberg on Saturday morning said, there's nothing to worry about in New York and all this stuff, you know, I never hear about it. I never hear, wow, that was, you know, I hear it from my friends at Fox because of the fact that I got them warned before. Or how about the Corpus Christi snowstorm at Christmas 2004? Austin American-Statesman 10 days before was busting on me and said, hey, you know what? This is a kind of pattern. It could snow around Christmas time in South Texas, you know? And then when it does, no one says boo about it there. So yeah, I got a little sympathy for these guys on the other side. I didn't say those things to get attention. I said those things because, wow, look, this looks like it's going to happen because of what happened before. I've seen patterns like this before. So you take Texas, for instance, this year. I mean, think about it. It snowed in the low Rio Grande Valley in 1997-98 winter. It snowed in Corpus 04-05. That's an El Nino winter. When I was a kid in College Station, 63-64, January 16th, I got the pictures. I should put the pictures up of me standing out there at A&M. I was 8 years old, and there I built a snowman out there. So all these things, when you see you see the maps, and you go back and you research that, and wow, look at this. This map looks like this. Maybe in 5 days it is going to snow, right? So you say it. So some of these other guys are doing that too. So I think there's some purity of motive. I really do. You know, I don't think it's all like, oh, I'm going to get attention and a bunch of followers. You know, I actually had someone say that to me. I actually had someone, a dear friend of mine, one dear friend of mine said, I say what I say just to get attention, right? And another dear friend said, you know that if you change your position on global warming, you'll lose all your followers, right? You know what? Garrett tonight, Garrett put this thing on, like, Garrett and Jesse, my kids, maybe a Facebook fan page. I don't even know about it. It was the first time I saw it. I mean, I knew it was there, but Garrett said, hey, I put that video on your Facebook fan page. I go, oh, let me see it, because I don't even go to a Facebook fan page like that. So I do think a lot of these people do have a pure motive at heart, and I feel very, very sympathetic toward people with the tremendous love of the weather, and I think a lot of these people do. So, you know, hopefully that doesn't.
I think, Joe, all we're asking is that people forget the human impact, the ethics of this. If you forecast a snowstorm or an ice storm 3 weeks in advance, and in my case, I had multiple examples of people that were beginning to take action that would endanger human life.
Yeah.
One mom said, my child has a very serious situation. We have to have dialysis in 3 weeks. Do I need to cancel it and move my family literally to Miami? Or this is where this stuff begins.
Why would she pay? Okay, well, why would she pay attention to someone? I mean, I don't know. I think that, you know, you got to let the buyer beware. For instance, shouldn't she be paying attention to you based on the fact that you've had more experience than God? I'm
well,
only
that's
kidding.
the problem. Is these people a lot of these people put themselves out there, and they honestly they don't even share their so-called credentials or experience, and most of them have no weather or meteorology background whatsoever. They share maps and they say this is a forecast, and they don't understand the extent of what they're doing, and people don't get that.
I don't think it's like yelling fire in a crowded theater. I think there's a lot of things out there. I think one of the big problems is today that people are no longer vigilant. They don't guard their hearts the way they're supposed. You know, you're supposed to. They don't read or research. I think Ann Coulter's statement that history began 10 minutes ago for a lot of people has a lot of validity. People they completely forget what someone said 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago or whatever, right? And again, I made a point is that sometimes the worst are judged on their best day, while the best are judged on their worst day. It's human nature. Everybody hates the New York Yankees, right? A lot of people hate Alabama football. Why? Because they win all the time. I'm serious. And so they're always rooting for the underdog. Always, it's human nature. So the question is, in the pursuit of the correct answer, any given forecast, whether it's a 3-month forecast for an energy company, long-range forecast, what do you keep your eye on? Do you keep your eye on what everybody else is saying, or do you focus on the weather? Now, with me, as far as everybody else, I have trusted people, and I know some of my competitors are really, really good. So if they say something, it'll get my attention, right? Because I use them as guidelines. It's just as if it's no different than a competitive, let's say, football team says, well, we want to see how good we are. We're going to play Arkansas this week, okay? We'll measure how good we are, right? And there's certain things you do use as guidelines, but all this other stuff that goes on, you get yourself driven nuts trying to figure out, well, this guy said this guy said that. Who do I trust? What should I tell the public? You know what? I think if you put out your forecast and you're responsible, people understand where you're coming from, they're going to trust you, and then you're going to have to live with being right or live with being wrong. And I don't think you can really sit there and say, well, we got to stop this guy from saying this and this guy from saying that. The one time the guy is right and you were wrong, it leads to all sorts of big problems. So I don't know.
Right, and understand it's not about shutting people down or shutting down the First Amendment. It's about those that are serious about it, consider ethics and societal implications of what you're saying. Because what happens, Joe, people see it in their Facebook feed. They see a headline. They don't even look to see who wrote it. They don't read the details. They just see it, and they act on it. And people have learned that the more outrageous the headline, the more likes and the more clicks and the more impact and the more control that they'll have, and it's just a problem. And the other thing that we do, Joe, that I don't know if you deal with this or not, I will probably deal, like today, this is Tuesday, January 12th, I probably personally answered over 150 questions via Facebook private message, via Twitter, via electronic mail, via Snapchat. It is consuming for us, and we try and respond to all of this. And so much of what we try and put out every day, it's fires coming from these 4- and 5-week snowstorms. So having said that, Joe, how far out can we forecast specific weather? AccuWeather has a 45-day forecast. But first off, what are your thoughts on that?
They're recycling the CFSV2. We know. I mean, we know what they're doing. The CFSV2 comes out every 6 hours, so you develop a program to just, figure it out. I mean, I think in general trend forecasts, okay, For instance, we predicted a cold January, February, March in the southern and eastern part of the United States. I love that forecast. That forecast has been out since August. Now, what is very fascinating was the Washington Post and the Capital Weather Gang, and I happen to like them. I don't think they like me. They did a comparison of my forecast, which was an actual. This is what got me mad. Actual snow and percentage of normal, first flake to last flake, and temperatures, okay, versus something that AccuWeather put out, which was a media-driven thing where occasional mild days or cloudy a lot of the time. You know, it wasn't really a forecast. And what they did was they compared an actual forecast to something that wasn't intended to be the actual forecast. So if I want to judge my forecast against AccuWeather's, I want to see their temperatures and I want to see their snowfall, and I have my temperatures, my sun, not occasionally cloudy days or occasional lake effect or wet or stormy or something like that. I mean, these descriptions, and you know, my big beef with NOAA a lot of times is you don't put out a forecast, you put out a probability of an occurrence against a certain percentage of normal. Okay, like you got, oh, well, we had colder than normal in Texas. We had a 35% chance of it being cooler than normal, and the normal chance of it being cooler than normal is 33%. So I want to see the temperatures, the metrics we actually measure. All right. So what was weird was when Judah Cohen Cohen's legendary to a bunch of us. Now what happens is the kind of pattern we envisioned from Weather Bell from the summer would set up a lot of snow in Eurasia, right? And that Judah uses that September, October snowfall to judge the the U.S. Snow and ice. And he had a forecast. The Washington Post did this huge thing on it. It looked exactly like the Weather Bell forecast, but ours was out 2 months earlier. Now I'm sitting there going, what kind of bias is that when you compare me to something that's obviously a media was designed for media? Okay, that particular map from the people at AccuWeather is designed for media. Fine, but then you're comparing that map to one that actually is trying to define temperatures and precipitation, okay? And then when the guy puts that out 2 months later, it looks like our forecast, not even a mention that, wow, this looks a lot like Weather Bell. I wonder how come Weather Bell had that out earlier, right? No curiosity as to that, right? Now, I'm certainly, what I'm saying is, the way things are done today, right there, that's an example of how skewed things can be depending on who is distributing the information. And so with me, that forecast was off what we gave our energy companies to warn our energy companies that this was not 97, 98 coming. But look, I'm telling you, we didn't have Arctic shots like this in State College in January 97, 98. It was 8 to 10 degrees above normal here. And Chicago didn't hit zero, I don't think, in January of 98. It was 9 degrees above normal there. So there's been a big fight going on as to where this winter was going to turn. So when you're doing what I'm doing, my energy companies want to know, okay, what are we looking at heating degree days this year? So we tell them, we put out that forecast. Now, can I nail to the date that, oh, there's going to be a snowstorm here? We felt that from mid-January into March, there'd be a lot of snow this year in the south and eastern part of the United States. And you know what's starting to bother me? You know, I confessed it on the blog. I said, you know what? I keep running these beautiful maxes right through the slot, underneath the four quarters. Here they come. It keeps getting warm and raining with them. That's not good. You know, because when I'm seeing the kind of pattern I envision, but it's not producing the weather as far as the snowfall goes. And snow is very, very crucial. It's crucial to all these people. The temperature forecast, I think, is going to turn pretty darn. It's turning great for January. I mean, it's even colder. You guys stop and think. You know, the reason, I don't know if you watch what goes on in natural gas, but it's a metrics for what the market, the media market actually thought. The reason why you had the huge surge in natural gas was 2 weeks before January started, most people didn't think it was going to get cold in January. So there was that's what goes on with that type of thing, because as you know, other commodities are depressed. So I watch all this stuff going on to try to get a gauge of where we are in comparison to other folks. As far as specific details, can I tell you Valentine's Day there's going to be a foot of snow so you could just cuddle up with the one you love and everything? No, I can't tell you that right now, but I think that the pattern would be ripe for more than normal snowfall in February. And then when you hone in on the storms as you get close, that's when you try to hit them. Some of them are easier to see than others. Let's face it, there's some things that stick out like sore thumbs, and amazingly, the more extreme an event is, usually the easier it is to see it. It's when they all start running together. As you know, in the South, you don't need some 992 low at Mobile to dump a lot of snow. What you usually get these waves that come across, and when you go back and review the maps, it's just like a bump coming through in the northern Gulf of Mexico, and someone's got 5, 6, 7 inches of snow in the I-20 corridor. What we do is, I remember last year, I was shamelessly sucking up to the people of Duck Dynasty because I want to be on Duck Dynasty. Right?
What? What?
I want to be on Duck Dynasty for a snow episode. So 10 days before, I said, get ready. It's going to snow in West Monroe, Louisiana. I'll never forget, I think someone said, why don't you hit today's storm? I said, well, to a long-range forecaster, today's storm, that disappeared from my view a week ago because I'm trying to get things in the 5 to 10, 10 to 15, 1 to 2 months, that type of thing. We already have a hot summer forecast for the Midwest this year. We already have the return of the hurricanes. I mean, for someone like me, I'm looking at this pattern going, this looks like a let's call it a dumbed down version of 03, 04, 05 shaping up, 16, 17, 18. All right.
So I have a question. How do you go from the winter of 60, 65, 66 to a summer of 04, 05? I mean, in your mind, how does that work?
The hurricane season I'm talking about. What's going on in the Atlantic? Now let's remember the 66 hurricane season. Faith was a monster, longest track on record. I mean, and 66 had the big heat wave in July and August also. So you see similarities.
The record's still
it's a bounce back off the ENSO. We know that the Atlantic's very warm. We've got a nice cold pool in the North Atlantic. So what you're going to see this year, and you're already beginning to see it in the climate models, is the bundling of. Last year you had too much warm water. When you have warm water at 30 north, 35 north in there, it distorts the pressure gradient. So the higher than normal pressures further south, lower than normal pressures further north, and it wrecks everything. Okay. When you push the warmer water down further south, and you get it down where a lot of it is down under 25 north, and you reverse the El Nino, which is going on. Now, this El Nino is already collapsing. People don't know it yet, but 1.2 is tanking, and you can see the climate models. If you guys go and watch Scripps, you guys look at the Scripps site, it reverses it to a pretty much a Super Nino by the fall. I mean, it's really going wild with that, and that's in line with the flop that occurred in the late 90s, too. 97, 98 was followed by the hurricane season of 98, 99. Let's remember that. Okay? The El Nino of 02, 03, at 03, 04, 05. All right? 06, 07, what came off of that? The hurricane season of 08, which, okay, we didn't have any major hurricanes. Yeah, Ike, Gustav, really. In any other years or, but maybe by the Sappler-Simpson scale, but they were high-impact storms. So, after 09, 10, we saw 11 and 12, and both 11 and 12 were there by the grace of God, go us. And 10, too. Remember, 10, we had a very high ACE year, but we didn't have a lot of landfalling storms. So you're going into that. The other thing is, too, decadally. Decadally, we are in the late 1950s right now. This is sort of the equivalent of the El Nino of 57, 58, all right? Which, if you remember what happened in the 50s, the PDO flipped. Everything flipped in the early 50s. You had the El Nino of 51, 50, 51, and what happened? 52 through 54, big heat wave in Texas. We had the El Nino of 09, 10. What happened? The heat wave followed right in. 3 years of the heat wave, right? Same kind of situation. It's remarkable. In 57, the drought broke in Texas. It broke this year in Texas, too, because of the El Nino 57, similar to the El Nino going on now. It's not exactly the same. It's similar. But what happens is you research the patterns decadally, yearly, monthly, and you start seeing them intertwined together. Now, the difference now is that we've souped up the temperature. I would say that the oceans are probably 0.2 C warmer than they were back in the 50s. But you're seeing the same kind of temperature representation, so then you try to apply that to what you're seeing today. And, of course, we've got all the great modeling. One of the problems, I think, with the GFS is it can't handle the heat. I think that it's got poor physics in the tropics. This is why you keep seeing it pull the stuff it pulls, especially with feedback situations. I think that this has been going on for 20, 30 years. For those in the mid-Atlantic states, the Northeast, Usually when a snowstorm is forecast south of New York City on day 4 in the GFS, it's coming. If it's forecast on day 4 in New York City, then it's probably going to rain. So it just shifts it back north. So you see this stuff going on. The European likes to hold troughs in the west because it feeds back into the Rockies with its cold air. And all of a sudden you'll see, if you watch a European, a lot of times these troughs come into the west and they look like they're not going to come out. Then all of a sudden, bang, they shoot out further east on subsequent model runs. So you start watching all these biases go on. And when you start watching the biases, you start saying, okay, I can adjust this, I can adjust that. That's why when you look at the MJO, they have the bias correction, because they understand that there's something, and the Madden-Julian oscillation is huge because of the fact that it's telling us to some extent what's going on in the tropics, and the tropics are the greatest source of heat. So we try to factor all these things, but you're dealing with an infinite system that doesn't go to sleep, and you're just trying to keep up with it. And so the answer is I think you can get general trends right. And for those that actually hit the dates of storms, God bless you, you're better than me. I mean, I can't tell you from now that February 15th is going to snow. I will tell you something interesting, though. And again, a lot of people don't like hearing this from me. They want meteorology, climatology elevated to such a hard degree that no one need apply. But I'll tell you what, I've met a lot of great farmers in my life, and a lot of great people of land and my dad could read the sky better than me. They look at stuff, they understand what's going on. And I heard in the winter of 2001, 2002, I was in a general store in Old Fort, Pennsylvania, and there's an Amish farmer in there. So I says, hey, you ready for winter? He goes, there's not going to be any winter. This is like in November. I said, what do you mean there's not going to be any winter? Do you know who I am? Like that, or one of these things. And he says, no, my horses have no hair on them. He had Dutch draft horses. And what happened was 0102 was a non-winter here in central Pennsylvania. So I thought, wow, I'll be darned. You know what happened? Those horses don't have hair on them when you have warm, dry Octobers with a lot of sun. If you go and look at State College, when Octobers are warm and dry with more than normal sunshine, the winters usually are very warm here. So I say, that's it. I figured this whole thing out, right? So 2005, I was in a McDonald's, and this Amish lady walks in with her kids, and I had my kids in there, and she was with her sister, I guess, And so I say to the tallest kid, I said, hi, Jakey, how you doing? He goes, how'd you know my name's Jakey? And I know a little bit about the Amish. A lot of times they name their firstborn Jacob, because Jacob wrestled the angel, strength and all that stuff. So the mother comes over and says, why are you talking to my kids? And I said, well, I was just talking with them with my kids over here. Garrett and Jesse were little. And she goes, oh. And I says, hey, what do your horses look like? So she says, my horses? We don't have horses. We have mules. Why do you ask? And I told her I was a long-range forecaster. She goes, you forecast the weather? I go, yeah. She goes, that's interesting, because the Amish don't care about the weather at all. But lately, the latest thing I've heard, and this worked last year here in State College, that if the deer are real fat, we have longer than normal winters here, right? So last year we had, I'm serious, right? So this year the deer are real fat here, and it fits with the idea of a winter like that. Now people say, that's preposterous or anything else. But you know something? Maybe the reason why the deer are fat is that the pattern that led to a lot of food in the summer is the same kind of pattern that would evolve into a later winter, right? So you got to go back and research those kind of things. So people get all.
How do you measure the level of fatness of a deer? What would classify a fat?
What happens?
How do you quantify that?
Here's how that's done. My buddies go out deer hunting every year, and you say some years the deer are fat, some years the deers aren't fat at all. They're the ones that have to cut them up after they shoot them. Right?
So talk to a hunter.
I say, how are the deer this year? He says, they're very, very fat. Now, what's interesting is they're not fat in Ohio. People in Ohio tell me they weren't fat at all there. What you think about something, the El Nino winter a lot of times, they don't get it back there. You get it further east and south. And you think about 58, let's say the winter of 57, 58, it didn't get started till February. And, you had the greatest snowstorm in record, Pennsylvania, in March of 58. Now, again, people say, "Oh my gosh, this guy." But you know something? Nature does things like this all the time. We just think we're so darn smart as men that we don't need to pay attention to that stuff. But I found
some of us don't.
well, let me tell you, I found, and this is because I love talking to older people. You know, love talking to farmers and stuff. These guys are really smart, and it figures out. You got to figure that if they have to make their living off the land, they better know what's going on, and better be able to recognize certain things that are going on and understanding certain cycles. And I think some of these old timers know exactly what they're doing, and they could put us to shame.
I got one more question for you, Joe. I am the youngest weather brain on the panel, and not by age, but by experience. And I say that kindly. But what would you say to someone like me? I've done a couple of winter forecasts over the last couple of years, basically self-taught. So what advice do you have for others who are listening? Because we have a lot of aspiring meteorologists who are listening, and up-and-coming meteorologists, people who are weather enthusiasts. What do you say to us who want to do more research, who are fascinated by the long-range forecasting, and who just want to learn more and you can spill out these patterns like it's nothing. Not that we're ever going to be that good, but how can we even begin to look at those patterns?
Well, it depends on the amount of love and fascination you have with something. You know, I realized from the get-go that I wasn't the smartest guy out there, you know, in my classes and things like that. But I had a great curiosity for history and climatology and what happened before in the weather. Why did that storm do that? Why did this storm do this? And through the efforts of, you know, when I was blasting the GFS, everybody hears me blast the GFS. Let me tell you something. NOAA is a great organization, all right? I'm not just blowing smoke here, trying to apologize, be nice. They have so much stuff that you can go and look. The reanalysis and everything else, it's worth its weight in gold. Believe me, it's worth the tax money we put into it. So I spend hours and hours. A lot of people read books. This is what I do, okay? It's because I'm fascinated with it. And I don't know. You know, it's like, without trying to get too technical or whatever, in wrestling there's something we call chain wrestling. The real good wrestlers chain wrestle. They're so prepared and they've worked so hard. They just move and they know how to move on everything. And they've done it because it's years and years and years and years. I'm talking collegiate wrestling here, not WWE. So you have to get to that. You have to get to that kind of level with it. I mean, you have to get to a level where you're almost obsessed with it, and there's a tremendous risk you're going to be wrong. If you know, it's very rare when I'm wrong because I have not identified the factors that are going to control the weather. The problem is I may weight them wrong. Whether it's my bias, I don't know. I'm sure I have biases one way or the other, and I try to keep those things conscious. Like Garrett reminds me all the time that, Dad, a lot of times you're too fast. You're too fast with something. You'll say coming, but you know something, it's not like it's a matter of timing, because after all, last year, mid-January, the weekend of Deflategate, think about it, that weekend was 50 in Boston and raining. How many people knew that February 34 was on the way, like we were saying? The Weather Bell was saying, February 34, go look at those maps, that's what's coming as far as the cold goes. Well, I didn't see other forecasters jumping on how bad that was going to be then. So it is a matter, sometimes it's a matter of timing, sometimes it's delayed, not denied, but there have been the times when I busted completely. The first year of winter out of, when I came out of AccuWeather, 11-12, I thought that would be more or less be a normal winter. It's one of the warmest ones on record. I didn't identify one of the most extreme warm events. I missed 01-02, for instance. I missed January of 06. I remember it's like I was in the Garden of Gethsemane. Every day, just warmer and warmer and warmer. We started cold in December. Of course, it came back at the end. New York had the great blizzard in February 2000. But I remember those things. I remember the busts like they were yesterday. So, you know what? If you beat me, you're not going to beat me on the same thing again. See, that's the thing that I make sure. And what's a shame about me is that I'm not smart enough to anticipate these things. If I'm corrected, the weather corrects me, it usually doesn't get me on that again. but there are guys out there that can see it before. And sometimes I think my advantage is because I know that I need to be corrected, that I will try to outwork everybody. You can't control talent sometimes, but you can control heart and hustle. And so for those that want to do this, it's great. It's very rewarding. It really is. But you got to have heart, and you got to have hustle, and you got to be willing to spend hours and hours and hours doing things that basically would classify you as a real nerd. All right, hey, guys. You know what? When I remember being at Penn State, at Saturday nights I'd be up in the weather tower plotting weather maps. Okay, to try to figure out which stations behave certain ways on clear, calm nights. Can you imagine that everybody's out drinking and partying and all this stuff? I didn't drink when I was in college anyway, but I'd be sitting there going, well, look at Elkins. Look at the pressure at Millville, how it's always higher than Atlantic City by a millibar on a clear, calm night. All this stuff that goes on, right? So I got used to looking at all those things, and that's what I did. I'm a nerd, you know. I had no life or whatever. But I've enjoyed
for Joe, for you to be on this show, we know that you have no life. So, real quick, we got to pause for just a second, and we do have to wrap up here. But before we do that,
I could do a rap.
Yeah, I would love to hear that. But we got to play Tony Rice in the astronomy report. Brian, we're going to put your WeatherBrains 101 on hold for next week, and we'll do a quick weather round. We'll let Joe do the weather for next year, or for all of 2016, and then we're going to do the email inbox, and I've got to do some television shortly. But again, let's pause very quickly for Tony Rice in this week's astronomy report.
Looking beyond the atmosphere, here's Tony Rice with your astronomy outlook.
As America's weatherati converge on New Orleans this week for the annual AMS conference, I wonder how many know of the area's contributions to the space program. 30 minutes northeast of the convention center lies NASA's Michoud Assembly Facility. Originally built to construct Liberty ships and cargo planes, it's also produced 12-cylinder tank engines for the war effort. After the war, it was transferred to NASA, and from 1961 to 1972, Michoud provided the Apollo and Skylab programs with the first stages for the Saturn I and 1B rockets, and then later the massive Saturn V rocket. Its canal-side location allows the completed boosters to be loaded onto barges and then transported to Florida for launch. From the 1970s to just a few years ago, the Space Shuttle program's orange 15-story tall external fuel tanks, 136 of them in all, were also manufactured there. The site is also where a bit of aviation weather history happened as well, when heavy precipitation over the Gulf of Mexico caused both engines on a Boeing 737 to flame out. After several failed attempts to relight the engines, the pilots made a dead-stick landing on the grass levee alongside the Michoud facility. Damage to the aircraft was light, and once the engines were changed out, Boeing test pilots were able to take the aircraft off again. The plane remains in service today for Southwest Airlines, so keep a lookout for tail number N697SW. Today, Michoud has shifted its focus once again, this time to the Space Launch System, which will take us beyond low Earth orbit and on to Mars. Time does march on, though, with robotics handling more of the work. Instead of the 10,000 workers required during the Apollo era, 3,000 during Shuttle, only 600 to 800 will be required to build the most powerful rocket ever. Thanks in part to a 70-foot wide, 15-story tall welding machine, accurate to within thousandths of an inch. Like most of the area, the Michoud Assembly Facility has Katrina stories to tell. Overall, the facility suffered very little damage thanks to the ride-out crew of 38 NASA and Lockheed Martin employees who stayed behind to protect the facility and the space hardware inside. Though waves topped the 19-foot levee, pumps stayed operational, removing over 1 billion gallons of water during the storm. The ride-out crew was awarded NASA's Medal for Exceptional Bravery. They weren't the only dedicated ones there, though. Nearly all of the 2,000 employees at the time returned, despite 600 of them having lost their homes. That's your Astronomy Outlook. Follow me at RTP Hokie for more spacey stuff like this.
When the weather ball is red, warmer weather is ahead. When the weather ball is white, colder weather is in sight. When the weather ball is green, no change in the weather is foreseen. When colors blink by night or day, precipitation's on the way.
We are doing this show on Tuesday, the 12th of January. Weather roundup in the short term. Cold, Joe. Cold, man. Cold. How cold is it going to be for the rest of the winter?
Well, we think it's going to run below normal from Texas through the deep south and up the eastern seaboard into the lower Ohio Valley the rest of the winter on into March. There's probably going to be a bit of a pullback later on January into early February, and then comes, again, gangbusters. It's very interesting watching the modeling fight here between U.S. modeling, which continually tries to turn this into 97, 98. And, of course, we're almost opposite of that. A lot of people don't realize 97, 98 was cold November into December and flipped around after that. I also believe that you're going to see several snow events from Texas to Atlanta up into the Carolinas. And we expect that the several snowstorms at least get into the mid-Atlantic states. Don't think New England is as bad as last year. All right, we don't, but which is pretty easy to say. But you have a very active southern storm track. You're going to have enough blocking going on in Canada so that pressures build in Canada enough that these storms come along, especially February on into March. A lot of people don't understand that the atmosphere to produce snow is at its coldest levels. It's more likely to snow in February than any other month once you're north of Interstate 40. So the very, very cold air that's coming now, I don't know if you guys have been watching what's going on with the GFS, how it's MJO. It just is incapable of hitting the Madden-Julian oscillation and some of the funky things it was trying to do in holding the Arctic air out of the United States Sunday into Monday. I don't know if you watched it, kept the vortex up, and now, of course, it's swinging it through the lakes and everything else. Mm-hmm. This is going to be a real problem until the jet begins to weaken in March and April, and then I expect much better skill with the CFSV2, April, May, June, July, and August, and you will see the cold. It's like this. The last 3 weeks or so, the cold has been extending from Alaska toward Texas, all right? For the next 3 weeks, the center of the cold is in the heartland of the country, and then once we get into February and March, it's probably from Texas northeastward into the mid and North Atlantic states in February and on into March. And once we break it in March, then we'll snap pretty quickly. Remember what happened in March of 2010? It just snapped after Snowmageddon, and you may see that kind of thing happen again. As far as the hurricanes go, here we go. We're hyping hurricanes and everything else. You know, if the weather were as extreme as some of the folks are saying, I mean, why would I want to play down extreme weather? Think about it, guys. When people say he doesn't believe in global warming, the weather's getting more extreme. The more extreme the weather is, the better it is for my business. So I wish it was as extreme as people are saying. But look, we're going to have a return to the La Nina mid and late summer. The Atlantic is bubbling warm, and I think that and I've warned folks on my side of the global warming issue to understand that Ike, Gustav, and Sandy, we have a power and impact scale, all rated as major storms. So I don't buy this, we haven't been hit by a major storm. But you can see 7 or 8 major hits on the U.S. coast in a 3-year period. You go back and look at 1915, 16, you go back and look at 04, 05, things can change around real quickly, and what will happen is, even though the globe will be cooling at that time, you'll get the propaganda swinging the other way because of the hurricanes, and I do think the hurricanes are going to make a big comeback over the coming 3 years.
And again, Joe's talking long-term, and Dr. John in the short-term. Interesting setup with a clipper coming down the pike for you guys in Pennsylvania, getting slammed with a few snow squalls this evening. But good-looking subtropical jet, Dr. John.
Yeah, some of the content that Joe was just talking about really shows up well here in this view of North America, the subtropical stream coming right across Mexico, Gulf of Mexico, and into the western Atlantic, and it looks awfully blocky to me. You can see the ridge developing way up into western Canada now, and so the gates are open for that cold air to come out of Hudson Bay and actually the polar regions.
You know what I think is wrong with this, and I've been doing a lot of reflecting on this. That these things are coming through, and they're pulling a lot of. You know, we're not seeing the highs hold. These highs are coming out of western and central Canada and just running through to the south and wrecking the overrunning zone for these storms. I think that this has to do with the intensity of the jet, most likely because of the extreme baroclinicity that has to be available this year because of how warm the water is and how cold this air really is aloft. I mean, it is trying to counter it aloft. So I think that once we start shortening wavelengths, we'll be able to see more of these Ontario highs that try to hold their ground. And some of these textbook systems, I'll tell you, John, I don't know about you, but I'm sitting here, when I see stuff go south of the Four Corners and bowl across the country, I'm usually licking my chops here in Pennsylvania, and it's been frustrating waiting until January 12th to see snow around here. It's more important to me to see it snow in the I-95 corridor and back into Atlanta and into the deep south this year, because we have West Texas targeted, and we have the southern Appalachians targeted as the greatest areas for above normal snowfall. So as far as the forecast goes, I'd like to see it respond with that, but there'd be storms that have to come a little bit further north.
All right, real quick, Aubrey had a power hit, and she is off, so we're going to hold the email, I think, until the next show. It's awfully windy there, but we're going to do Picks of the Week. And again, I have to step away and do television, but Joe, thank you for coming on the show tonight. And by the way, I really missed the videos that you did with Ken Reeves. I thought those were fantastic. Remember the Long Ranger?
I miss Ken.
So do I.
Miss Ken every day. There's not a day that doesn't go by I don't think of him. And,
me too. I think about him a lot.
Yeah, well, I'm close friends with Bernie, although Bernie Rayno, I keep saying, come on, let's go out. I think he's afraid to go out with me because he thinks I'm too irresponsible. He is the most handsome man in weather, and he'll be able to tell you that himself.
He's a very attractive man. But Bernie's a great guy. Yeah. But anyway, I've got to step away. It is time for the news here. So Joe, thank you. But Dr. John, I'll let you finish it up with Picks of the Week here. But thank you guys. We'll see you all next week. Dr. John.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, James. Hey, Joe, did anybody tell you about Picks of the Week? Did they give you a clue?
No, I've got my lottery picks right here, but they didn't.
That's right, Pennsylvania. You need that. Now, actually, this is a link or a story or something that we can point our listeners and viewers to. We put it on our webpage every week, so I'll let you think about that for a minute. And I'll tell you what, Peters.
Stick the weather bell. The weather bell.
It's already in there, Joe. So
yeah, I'm not surprised.
Yeah, we also have a section on weather sites that we may discuss or reference it during the show, and Weather Bell's already on there.
Well, there are a lot of great weather sites out there, and I always try to give them plugs when I use their stuff if they have it out there. And I like Tropical Tidbits. Their site's good.
Yeah. Great
Penn State EWAL site is good.
Yep.
You know, I like it because, you know, if they're going to compete up the level, then we have to up the level too. You know what, though? It's unfair because we have Maui. I mean, Dr. Ryan, seriously.
He's
seriously.
Great. Yeah, he put it on the show, Joe. We know what that is.
Yeah, his maps are so good. I once had a graphics artist who really, she doesn't care that much about the weather. She goes, these are the most beautiful representations of the weather I've ever seen. Right? I was like, yeah, well, I know that guy, you know. So, but I don't know. I have Picks of the Week. I mean, there's so many good ones out there. I don't know.
Oh, there are.
I think Tropical Tidbits has not been used, so why don't you use that one?
Well, assuming that we all love Weather Bell, we'll use Tropical Tidbits too. Those guys know that I'm one of these guys where even in a situation where if I get a piece of information from someone I used to work with, even though obviously I'm competing against the company I used to work for, AccuWeather, I will credit someone from AccuWeather too. So Tropical Tidbits will be my site, assuming you're going to Weather Bell first. Okay, so
yes.
that's going to be
Weather Bell's already in there. So
all right, good.
Okay, good pick. Brian.
I don't have one.
No, I usually give you a couple.
I know, yes, but this week, I guess with the national championship the other night, I'm kind of out of kilter, so I don't have one. But I will mention James had one that was the AMS 2016 National Meeting Twitter feed, and Aubrey had the interactive snow information chart, which is always a good one. I think that one shows up pretty frequently in the wintertime. And then, John, you have yours, and then Kevin has one,
too.
An experimental El Nino forecast. So, and then, John, I'll let you tell everybody yours.
You know, my pick was actually an article that appeared at the Weather Channel, my former employer. And what piqued my interest about this one, Joe, was the event that occurred today. This is talking about these sub-advisory, high-impact events, particularly these half-inch, 1-inch snowstorms that come across with a squall and take tractor trailers off I-80, and you end up with these monster traffic, accidents. So that's what my pick is. It's actually an article issued by the Weather Channel, and they actually go further on in this article and talk about what a winter weather advisory is. And I think the term advisory, that's become a problem, I think, in terms of the general public understanding the severity of an event. When they see an advisory, they think, oh, that's a downgrade from a watch. But we know that the opposite is true. So, what do you think? Joe, you're going to go with the tropical tidbits. You've got the rest of the picks here. So I get this at this point.
I guess that's what my Penn State E-Wall. I got Penn State E-Wall, the Penn State E-Wall.
Oh, yeah, I use that all the time.
Let's see what it's doing. Oh, Garrett's going to be happy. It's cooling us to below 0 at 8:50 and making it snow with this system up the eastern seaboard. So look at this thing. It's got. I'm sitting here going, even the GFS now has like a 968 low at the benchmark. If this doesn't change over to snow in Boston and Providence, I'm not going to be a happy camper. John, have you been watching the shenanigans with this the small Ryan calls it Baby Barney because it's got all the purple with it. The way the GFS kept holding that vortex out of the United States to the north and finally has turned around and is doing what the European has been saying for 6 days, bringing that whole thing down through the Great Lakes early next week, which is going to drive more sub-zero temperatures into Chicago. Do you know last Thursday there were no zero temperatures on the 10-day forecast in Chicago? The coldest was 6, and they hit -1 the other day. I think they hit -3 or 4 tonight. Right. But the worst is coming there. And, it's very interesting seeing that. I believe that there are major problems, systemic problems with the physics of this model where it can't handle heat and tropical feedback. And then once it figures that out, it gets it into the westerlies and feeds back and speeds things up too much in the westerlies, right? So it's having problems with that. I'm not a modeler, so I cannot quantify it in an educational term. I've just been watching this for 30 years go on now, since 1993. Is that 20 years or 30 years?
That's 20.
20. All right, 20.
You're not that old.
20 years, yeah. So, and like I said, I think that the European has problems, and a lot of times if it's digging troughs into the Rockies, it lifts the cold air too much and tries to keep cooling the air too much and keep the trough back there. It has a west bias. But in terms of that particular aspect, driving 492 thicknesses into Minneapolis, like the Europeans been doing, and the GFS holding it out, and what I do is going to make a major difference in the 4 to 8 day temperatures in there. And I think that's going to be a big deal because you're probably going to see the coldest air mass of the winter come into the United States this weekend, in the central part of the United States for them. So I think that's also something that's big. I don't know if I've been watching these models over the years, but it needs to be torn down and rebuilt. I don't think any amount of tweaking or money or speeding the model up is going to do anything. Clients all the time. If it agrees with the European, then you're okay with it. If it comes out with something different, then you better look at it a different way. Put it that way.
Yeah.
Wonder what kind of trouble I'm getting in.
Oh, I don't know, Joe, but I wish the rest of us were on board here so we can continue this conversation. We're going to have to get you back on.
All right. Well,
we will.
Maybe the end of the winter.
Like I said, I have no life except for the weather. Well, I have the good Lord above. I have my family. And, I'm the mascot for the Penn State wrestling team, so there, right there.
Well, Joe, I never got a chance to formally invite you onto the program because actually that was my role tonight, so let me formally thank you for being on the program.
Well, you guys
it's always a pleasure.
You enjoy the weather. It's the only weather you got. That's how
true. Well, thanks, Joe.
Good night.
And since it's just Brian and I and Joe left, let me wish everyone a good evening. And this has been WeatherBrains. You can listen to us weekly podcasts, news, netcasts, issued at 9:30 Monday evening in the East, 8:30 in the Central Time Zone. And at this point, we will. Yeah, go ahead, Brian.
And don't forget to sign up for Skywritings.
Skywritings. Yeah, we want to keep pumping that out.
We're still missing 5 states, so we got to have subscribers from every state. And
we'll get there.
We're getting close to 500 subscribers, so
we'll get there, Brian.
Great. So don't, you know.
Until Monday, I wish you well.
Good night.
Take care.
All right. Thanks, Joe. Oh, he's gone.
He's gone.
Thanks, John.
Take care, Brian.
See you next week.
Yes, sir.
Wow. And the newscast is hitting like 7 minutes late. I actually could have stayed in here. Just found that out. It's we're hitting it like 07, like in 1 minute. But anyway, thanks to Joe. Very interesting show. We need to have him back on for more questions. But thanks to everybody for watching and listening. The produced audio show will be up here in just a little bit. Thank you guys for watching. Have a great week. God bless. We'll see you next week. We'll be back on Monday night, 9:30 Eastern, 8:30 Central for Weather Brains. Bye-bye.